So we are recording this Wayne Forward and Legal Aid meeting and community meeting to discuss the Fair Housing Goldsboro's consolidated plan and annual action plan for the HUD funds. So thank everyone for being on here. We had discussed earlier we are going to skip the individual introductions because there's a lot to cover. We want to make sure that we respect everybody's time. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Jocelyn and Legal Aid, and we'll get started.
Thanks so much, Matt. Again, thank you all for joining today's Zoom meeting. And for those on the phone call, thank you. We really appreciate it. In addition to our colleagues at the Justice Center, we really appreciate your assistance in getting that survey data. My name is Jocelyn Bolton Wilson. I'm one of the CED attorneys with Legal Aid. I am also here with my colleague, Alicia Amo, our managing attorney, Yolanda Taylor, and our colleague, India Silver. Just a brief overview of what we're going to talk about today. We're just going to go over the feedback of the poll questions, which would be led by our colleagues at the Justice Center, a general overview of the City of Goldsboro's consolidated plan, a general overview of the City of Goldsboro's annual action plan, and then next steps. Some quick housekeeping items. If you are not speaking at the moment, if you could place your phone or computer on mute, that would be very helpful. Additionally, we have a lot of information to go through as stated, so we were asked that you would remain and hold all questions until the end of the presentation. If during the presentation you see a slide or you have a concern, we ask you to address those concerns within the chat function within the Zoom meeting. We do have our colleague India Silver who will be monitoring the chat and making sure that all of those questions and concerns are addressed when we get to the latter portion of the presentation today. And with that being said, let's get started with the material. I'm going to give it over to our folks at the Justice Center to review the poll questions and answers. Selena, I'm going to stop sharing so that you can share your data. Is that okay?
Yep, that works fine.
Good morning, everyone. This is William Munn. I'm super happy to be here and discuss the poll questions. I'm having a little bit of technical feedback, so I'm going to hand it over here to Selena and let her run through this real quick. So I'll be back on in just a second.
All right. Let me know if you can see the screen.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I will start with question one. What is the age? And we had 99 respondents. So as we can see, the light orange or yellow respondents were between 25 and 34. The aqua blue color were between 35 and 44, and the orange were between 45 and 54. The purple was between 55 and 64, and the fuchsia color was 65 and older. So as out of all the respondents, the majority of them pretty much fell between 55 and older, with about 50% being 55 and older. And even though the yellow looks big and the purple look big, those respondents make up 2 people for other race. For question 2, what is the gender? The blue is female, the green is male. So majority of our respondents were female. And that number is 77% of the people were female and 23 were male. And here's where we see the ethnicities of the respondents. And if we look at the stats, 72% were white or Caucasian, 23% were Black or African American, 3% were Hispanic, 1% was American Indian or Alaska Native, and 1% was other. For marital status, green is single, blue is married, and the aqua blue is prefer not to say, the orange is other. Oh, and we have one that was on domestic partner. So in the statistics, 63% were married, so that makes up the good bulk of the respondents, and then 28 is single. And employment status, the green is full-time, meaning 40 hours a week or more. And the blue is part-time. The yellow is unemployed but looking for work. The aqua blue is unemployed but currently not looking for work. And the orange is other. And for full-time, it was 55%, part-time 5%. And there was 31% for other. And when we asked to specify, the vast majority of them were retired. There was one that was coronavirus layoff, and then there was one that was homemaker. And there are 2 that were disabled. For question 6, this is for the total household annual income. So for a whole household, the respondents for the green made under $15,000 a year. The blue was between $15,000 and $30,000. The yellow was between $30,000 and $50,000. The aqua blue is between $50,000 to $75,000. The orange is between $75,000 to $100,000. Purple being $100,000 to $150,000, and the fuchsia color being over $150,000. And if we look at the numbers, the top being responses were 27% were between 30 and 50,000, and the second one was between 50 to 75,000. So that made up a good half of the respondent. And for question 7, the highest level of education. Everyone had at least a high school diploma or over. The blue is high school diploma, the yellow being a bachelor's degree, the aqua color being a master's degree, the orange being a doctorate or a PhD, and the purple being other. So the top highest education for our respondents was 36% being bachelor's degree. The second one being 28 respondents being high school or diploma or equivalent. And for 15 of the respondents we had, it was mainly either an associate's degree or some college. And now I will hand it to you, Will.
All right. Let me see if I can get that screen. Let's see if I
so
can share my screen. Yeah, sweet. All right. All right. What do we have here? I think I got the wrong one. Can you all see, which screen do you see here?
The Survey Monkey.
Okay, for some reason it is not doing my second screen. Desktop 2. Yeah, that's the one I want. All right, so you guys see the Survey Monkey one?
Yes, it looks like question 8. What housing issues do you see?
Perfect. All right, so we're going to get into this. We had 68 respondents, and it's not surprising we had a little bit of drop off here because we start to get into folk having to type. And so I'm just going to read a couple of the first ones. Just today, we observed people sleeping along the strip malls next to Spence, Walmart, plus the many panhandlers we have just seen in the past. Entry and exits to highways gives the impression that not enough affordable housing, too much free housing, rundown, trashy areas need to be cleaned up. Rent is too high for the average person. Homeless people, no low income housing. So a good way to get a really good a good representation of what terms came up over and over is to do a word cloud. And so these are all the word terms. The larger the words are, the more often the terms came up in the comments. So it's a good way statistically to pull out what terms or what sentiments were most present in all of the 68 respondents. And so what we see here is low income, we see properties, we see lack, home. We do see affordable, enough affordable housing did show up there, need rental. And so that kind of gives us a cross section or an idea of what sentiments came forth. Question number 9, do you have any jobs, transportation, healthcare clinics, or grocery stores where you live? Grocery stores was the most was the entity that showed up the most with 79%, 54 of the respondents. We had 68 folk who answered that. We were able to get up to 104 total respondents for the survey, so it was pretty good given the short window we had. Are there any environmental concerns in Goldsboro? Please choose your top 3 concerns. And so I'm just going to go over the 3 top vote getters here. Number 1 was unsafe housing, lead poisoning, mold, poor infrastructure. Number 2 was water contamination, bodies of water or drinking water. And number 3, waste management. And we had 70 respondents there. Question 11, who do you want to influence change in your neighborhood? Overwhelmingly, people who live in my neighborhood. Followed by 23% of the respondents said people like city council and city staff. But overwhelmingly, we wanted to see change come from within. Where is affordable housing located in Goldsboro? I'm just going to do a word cloud real quick. It sounds like downtown downtown seemed to be apartments. Were the word clouds or the repeating terms that came out of this piece. What monthly rent would you consider to be affordable? Below 500 was the overwhelming choice here. 42% of the respondents with that response, and 35% below 750. We did have about 7% of the folk responding below 300. All right, how would you describe the quality of housing in your immediate neighborhood? A couple of the first, a couple of responses here, 67 responses. A step above trailers, but not sturdy or as brick houses. Good, 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 very good. Some are good. So let's do a word cloud real quick and see what we get here in terms of repeating phrases. Good, great, houses. We got a lot of poor here. That came up. That occurred about 9% of the responses. Good came up in about 46% of the responses here. Excellent, almost 5%. So that's what we have there. What needs to be improved in housing for your neighborhood? A couple of the first responses are affordable access to community water lines, sewer prices, better price and better condition. I live in a quiet community, no change, please. Internet dependability. So let's do a word cloud here and take a look at what jumps out at us here. Again, housing seems to jump out. Property is about 8%, 7% or 6.3% sewer. So that came that emerged more than once. So that's pretty interesting. There's infrastructure stuff there. Question 17, do you think that there are all types of affordable housing in Goldsboro for seniors, persons with disabilities, and families? A little was the most common response here, making up 33% of the response. Moderate, almost 25%. A lot, almost 19%. So we have some mixed feelings here. I don't think we have any overwhelming choice in this piece. Do you live in a racially segregated area? We have the responses here are interesting. So we have a great deal, 10%, a lot is almost 19%, moderate 19%, a little 19%, and overwhelmingly we're here 31%, none at all. Now these, if we have a chance to go near the end, we can separate these out by race, ethnicity, and there is a huge gap there in terms of responses. What can you do to confront social, economic, and racial justice issues that you see in the community? Vote, make people obey the law. I stand with everyone, and all need addressing, but I'm not sure how. My community is all Black, practice good ethics. We are good. Question mark. Some folks, I guess, didn't like that question. So we're going to hit a word cloud real quick. Speak. So that was 10% community. was 11% of the responses. Involved was 8%. So we definitely have involvement, sounds like, is the theme coming out of that question. Where is your neighborhood located in Goldsboro? So for the respondents, we 26%, 27% in the north side, 22% south side, east side, 22%, west side, 12%, and other was about 17%. Do you use a Section 8 voucher? No, we had nobody who responded yes there. Have you ever experienced difficulty in finding housing with your Section 8 housing? We had one person who responded yes. Everyone else who responded to the question responded no. If you have experienced difficulty with Section 8 voucher, please explain why. If this does not apply to you, write NA. I imagine the majority of these responses are going to be NA, and that's correct. And what other concerns do you have in regards to housing in Goldsboro? Here's a couple of the sample responses. This is the last question. Don't really venture out into the city much. Would like to avoid certain areas of town. There's too many. Let people work and pay for their own. Need affordable housing for seniors. None. Poor internet availability in Southwest Goldsboro. We're going to do a word cloud here. So none was the overwhelming response here. Need affordable housing, and looks like people in homes. So with that, I'm going to stop and happy to answer any questions at the end around this. Again, like I said, we can sort of break this out with regard to race, which makes it very interesting given differential experiences that we have in this country, in this region. And with that, I'll pass it back to our host.
Thanks, Will. Could you stop sharing your screen so I can get back to the presentation? Thank you for that information.
Absolutely. Did that work for you?
Yes.
Awesome.
All right. So getting into the consolidated plan, as we talked about last week, it's for 2020 through 2024. The beginning of the plan gives demographics of the area where the population is a little over 34,000 households, 12,000 in the median income, or over 12,000 rather, and the median income being $40,791. The main housing needs that are identified in the consolidated plan centered around affordable rental housing, home ownership opportunities, and sustainable working wages. A lot of this information was highlighted within the survey that you guys answered and forwarded out, which we really appreciate you for. And that's represented in the consolidated plan as well as some of the housing needs. Moving forward to slide 5, for those that aren't on the Zoom call, some of the severe housing problems that were identified in the consolidated plan, living in housing that lacks complete kitchen facilities, also housing that lacks complete plumbing facilities. Having more than one individual or person in a room overcrowded was one of the severe housing concerns or problems. And being that there are cost-burdening individuals, which means that more than 30% of the area median income is being used towards utility usage and housing needs as opposed to actual paying the rent. As far as African Americans, up to 80% of the AMI are disproportionately or have a greater issue with severe housing problems compared to other racial groups identified within Goldsboro. Moving forward to slide 6, housing cost burden in Goldsboro that was identified within the consolidated plan. Again, given that definition of cost burden means that a household pays more than 30% of its gross household income towards housing costs, including utilities, insurance, and property taxes. Having a breakdown of individuals based on race as far as the cost burdens, over 7,000 African Americans are facing are being cost burdened, 5,000 or so of individuals that are white, 615 of Hispanic households, 233 of Asian households, and 64 of American Indian households based on the analysis that was conducted by the city of Goldsboro, highlighting the fact that more African American households are facing cost burden issues compared to other races. Moving forward to slide 7, within the consolidated plan, the city of Goldsboro has highlighted several goals that they're looking to implement within that 2020-2024 tract. We're just going to give you all a brief overview of what was identified within the consolidated plan. If there are any concerns and issues that you note within this plan, again, please take note and place it in the chat. We're going to open the discussion later on for further conversation on the goals, the plans, and the consolidated plan as a whole. So with this first goal of affirmatively furthering fair housing choice, the city of Goldsboro has allocated $2,000 within that 4-year time span to affect change within this area, where the description identifies funds will be provided to taking meaningful actions to overcome significant disparities in housing needs and in access to opportunity, replacing segregated living patterns with truly integrated and balanced living patterns, transforming racially and ethnically concentrated areas of poverty. As stated, the city has identified $2,000. They're looking to assist 40 individuals with this amount of money to achieve this goal within the consolidated plan. Moving forward to goal 2, the city has identified increase in affordable renting housing option. They've allocated $525,000, a little over $525,000 to this particular goal, with the intent of constructing 82 rental units. And what the city of Goldsboro identifies as increasing affordable rental housing options is that the funds will be used to leverage public and private partnerships that produce new and affordable rental housing. This will allow for low to moderate income households to pay no more than 30% of their income for housing units, including utilities. Moving forward to goal 3, increasing access to affordable housing ownership. They've allocated $223,536 to this goal. There's a breakdown of individuals in which they seek to assist with this amount of money over the 4-year period, the 5-year period. 30 public service facilities or low to income housing benefit. 6 homeowner housing units will be added. 4 homeowner housing rehabilitation units, and 10 individuals with direct financial assistance to home buyers is what the city of Goldsboro is trying to do with this particular goal. And just giving a brief description, Goldsboro intends to have funds to reduce the monthly carrying cost of mortgage loans from private lenders to increase home ownership opportunities through down payment and closing cost assistance, along with housing counseling and services to low LMI households. Goldsboro will add new home ownership housing by one or more of the following activities: providing funds to nonprofits, or by Goldsboro utilizing funds for properties to be acquired. I'm not reading the entirety of the description. It's just a brief overview of what that description is for this goal, but I think it gives an understanding at least what Goldsboro is trying to implement with their description and the monies that they're putting towards this goal. Goal 4, improve and expand public facilities access and capacity. The total amount of money is $340,000, a little over that. And the funds will be used to support the needs of Goldsboro's residential sustainability growth, and at the same time replace existing facilities that have deteriorated due to age and have become obsolete within the LMI census tract. They're looking to assist 1,497 units of public facility or infrastructure activities within the LMI housing benefit range. So with $340,000 or so, they're looking to assist individuals or the quantity of 1,497 within this goal of expanding public facilities and access to capacity. In dealing with goal 5, providing essential service and employment training, $195,000 has been allocated to this particular goal. They're looking to assist 1,205 individuals within the LMI cost benefit range and 100 individuals within the homeless prevention range within this $195,000. a more detailed description provided by the City of Goldsboro, the funds will be used to provide and expand upon essential services and employment training to LMI individuals and families in special needs population, not to exceed the 15% public service cap as regulated by HUD. And that's their goal 5. Moving forward to goal 6, provide rehabilitation owner-occupied and city-owned properties. They're looking to allocate $185,000 or so to this particular goal, where homeowner housing added would be 6 units, homeowner housing rehabilitated will be 14 units, and buildings that will be demolished is 3. Just a brief description of what the City of Goldsboro has for this goal is funds will be provided for owner-occupied housing rehabilitation for LMI households and special needs population. Funds will also be provided by Goldsboro to acquire rehabilitated or reconstructing housing units to ensure affordability for LMI households and special needs populations, while reducing sum and blight to benefit LMI households and special needs populations within the physical environment of a deteriorating area. So that's the description for goal 6. Moving forward to goal 7, we have 1,300, I'm sorry, $135,243 are being allocated to this particular goal for program admin to support comp plan and the annual action plan objectives. They really don't have any individuals as far as the quantity that they're looking to assist with, but mainly it's going towards the administration of for the support for the consolidated plan and the annual action plan. So that's goal 7. Moving forward now to Goldsboro's annual action plan, there are identified projects that are within this particular portion. And the annual action plan is really that 1-year track period that Goldsboro is looking to actually implement the goals they've identified in the consolidated plan. So their first project is that they're wanting to address fair housing. They're allocating $2,000 to this particular project. And again, they're looking to assist 40 individuals in assisting with fair housing. The second project is housing counseling. They're looking to allocate $6,000 or so to this particular project identified in the annual action plan, with the intent of assisting 30 individuals or public service activities for LMI household benefit. And this is slide 12. Moving forward to slide 13, the third goal is public facilities and improvements, city-owned public facilities and improvements. $340,000 is being allocated to this particular project, where 1,497 units are going to be the amount of individuals that would be assisted through these funds with this project. A brief description: funds will be used to support the needs of Goldsboro's residential sustainability growth, and at the same time replacing existing facilities that have deteriorated due to age and have become obsolete with LMI census tract block groups. Moving forward to slide 14, which is the fourth project that's identified, and it's public services. There are $30,000 that have been allocated to this particular project. Over 700 units will be benefited from this, which that indicator would be public service activities other than low to moderate income housing benefit. That's 705 as identified by the plan. And the description states that funds will be used to provide and expand upon essential services and employment training to LMI individuals and families and special needs populations. So this is the goal, and this is the description that they're giving for this particular project for public services. Moving forward to slide 15. Project number 5, rehabilitation, acquisition, admin, and public-owned residential buildings. $185,000 is being allocated to this particular project, where the quantity of 6 housing units will be added, 14 rehab homes will be benefited from, and there will be 3 buildings that will be demolished under this particular project. Just a brief description. Funds will be provided for owner-occupied housing rehabilitation for LMI households and special needs populations. Funds will also be provided for Goldsboro to acquire, rehabilitate, or reconstruct housing units to ensure affordability for LMI households and special needs populations, while reducing slum and blight to benefit LMI households and special needs population within a physical environment of a deteriorating area. Moving forward to slide 16, this is project number 6, CHGO Reserve. The description here is funds will be used to add new ownership housing by nonprofits designated as community housing development organizations, which is a CHGO, for construction of new single-family housing within their organization's target areas. There's over $41,000 that's going to be allocated to this particular project, where the quantity of individuals that will be assisted would be 2. And now I'm going to give the slides over to my colleague Alicia, who's going to talk about project number 7 under the annual action plan.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Good morning, everyone. This is Alicia Mo from Legal Aid. I'm going to continue with our presentation. So for project number 7, it's about home buyer assistance, and this is for year 2020. Its goal is to increase access to affordable home ownership. And so the funds will be used to reduce the monthly carrying costs for mortgage loans and increase opportunities through down payment and closing costs for low to moderate income individuals. And so the direct assistance to home buyers is estimated to be 10 people that they will actually help for year 2020. All right, so we're at the next slide, slide 18. This project is number 8 for home buyer assistance and rehabilitation. Funds will be provided for properties to acquire, rehabilitate, or reconstruct as single family or multifamily housing. The number of homes will be adding 2 new homes and rehabilitating 2 new homes. And I also mentioned that about 113,000 are going to be used from home funds to do this. All right, next slide. Project number 9 is for rental housing development. Funds will be used to leverage public-private partnerships to produce new affordable rental housing. So they'll use roughly 525,000 of home funds to construct 82 rental units. Okay, the next project is for program administration. So this will be for their internal administration costs. And they've actually broken down the amounts from the various funding sources. So roughly 70,000 from CDBG, roughly 23,000 from home funds. And they'll also be using roughly 41,000 of that CDBG COVID funds to handle administrative costs to carry out the annual action plan. The next project is specifically related to those COVID funds. These were specifically allocated under the Federal CARES Act to address COVID-related issues. And so specifically, the city can use the money to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the spread of COVID. Their goal is to help 500 people through public service activities, and then help 100 people with homelessness prevention. So this one, since we just talked about COVID funds, I will just mention that the city will receive a total of $206,554 for COVID, and they plan to use all of it in this 2020 year. Some of it I just told you about, roughly 41,000 will be for administrative related issues, but they will also give some money to organizations to help with preventing the spread of COVID. Jocelyn, if you could go to the next slide, please. Okay, so the city proposed giving the remaining COVID funds to these various agencies that are listed here. So 10,000 to Wayne Uplift, so it could be used for rental and utility assistance. 15,000 for Goldsboro YMCA. 41,000 for Wayne Action Group for economic solvency, so wages. 41,000 for Watch, so Wayne Action Teams for community health. 8,000 for 4-day movement. 30,000 for the Salvation Army, and 20,000 for Partnership for Children of Wayne County. So you'll see at the bottom, the total for COVID funds that they're going to spread out between these individuals is, I'm sorry, these organizations is $165,246. Next slide, please. Okay, so the consolidated plan talked about barriers to affordable housing, and the city identified these specific areas. Neighborhood resistance. So the city mentioned that there were some residents concerned about increased traffic congestion due to the proposed developments, and apparently in the past, there were challenges by certain residents when developments were proposed. And one of those arguments was that there would be increased traffic congestion that some people did not want. Also, the city mentioned that there were some people who could not afford a down payment for a home, or they had poor credit histories for home ownership. So those were barriers for people that prevented them from becoming homeowners. Additionally, rental housing is limited and some housing is in poor condition. So the city identified these were major barriers to affordable housing. So the city also identified strategies to overcome these barriers, and they broke it down into 4 main strategies. So the first one is to create affordable housing in vulnerable areas and in areas of opportunity. So the city wanted to prioritize specific neighborhood conditions, including areas vulnerable to displacement and neighborhoods that provide access to opportunity to create affordable housing. The second one is preserve affordability and housing quality. The key is that Goldsboro wants to focus on preserving existing affordable housing, both home ownership and rental in vulnerable neighborhoods and in areas of opportunity. The third strategy will be to promote equitable and accessible housing options. So the city will have actions or policy decisions that try to enable housing strategies more broadly, and trying to come up with new and creative financing mechanisms. And then the last strategy is to stabilize residents at risk of involuntary displacement. So with some of this new development, there's a risk of residents being displaced. And so the city wants to look at policies or investments that try to help stabilize residents and support diverse, inclusive communities. Okay, so at this point, we want to go ahead and pause and give people an opportunity to share their comments, questions, concerns about the city's plans so far. So feel free to type in the chat. I know India's monitoring it. Some people have already been sharing, but if you have specific questions, go ahead and type in the chat. You could also unmute yourself and talk as well.
Okay, thanks, Jocelyn and Alicia, for the presentation. I'm taking a look at the chat now, and I see that Mr. Martin, he commented and said all the funding numbers appear to be incorrect. And Yolanda responded and said that she would like to hear more during the comment segment. So would this be a good time for him to speak about that?
Yes, please.
Okay, Mr. Martin.
Yes. On the numbers that are given for the 5-year consolidated plan, all of these numbers are actually numbers for the annual plan, and they aren't all of the numbers that are included on the annual plan. Because this is, I imagine, supposed to be the numbers for the 5-year period. And these are the numbers for a 1-year period. So they aren't really, the numbers for the con plan. And if you look at the con plan, the 5-year con plan numbers, the total numbers is significantly higher than this. So as far as
yes, Mr. Martin, that would be an error on my part then if you're not seeing the actual 5-year numbers, and the numbers that you are seeing are just for the annual action plan.
Okay.
Also, are you able to go back to a particular slide so Mr. Martin can point out what he means?
Let me go back.
The whole slide was visible or not?
Yes, could you go back to slide 7, please, Jocelyn? I think that's where we started with.
Right. So to your point, this is the annual action plan.
Correct.
Right.
And the funding amount of $2,000 for the period starting 2020 to 24 is not 2,000. It should actually be 10,000.
10,000. Okay. So I pulled this from the plan. What's here is the annual action plan. It says start year to 2020 to 2024. But to your point, the actual comp plan has other verbiage that says this is 10K. So the numbers show the 1 year as opposed to the 5-year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm looking at the numbers that were submitted to council on it. And there's a chart that has the projected available funds for fiscal year 2020 to 2024. And that's what I'm looking at. And that's what I think should be the numbers which are in this category for the consolidated plan.
Okay. What we'll do is make sure that we look at the comm plan data, because this information was just pulled from the document that was online. To your point, the numbers are different here, and that's fine. That shouldn't curb the conversation. The numbers here that are identified are different from what was submitted to council. So thank you for that, Mr. Martin. We'll make sure that when we draft our comments and provide feedback from what the comments that we gather from today's conversations for recommendations, that they represent what everyone on the call is saying.
And in addition, when we go back and actually look at the document, which I think this is a good reflection of that document, because all we did was just screenshot it for this presentation. If this is some, I don't know, deficiency on the part of the city of Goldsboro in their preparation plan, then, I mean, that's something that we need to raise, I will assume, if they're just copying and pasting and not putting the accurate numbers that were submitted to council. Is that what you're saying? Do you think this is a clerical or error on the part of the city, Mr. Martin?
I think so. And also, they haven't included all of the 5-year consolidated numbers for all of these activities. For example, I think homeowner buyer assistance isn't included in the consolidated plan, but it is listed in the annual plan under project number 7. I don't see this number in the con plan, this action plan number of 62,000. Now, I may have missed it, but I didn't see this one. I also didn't see the number for project sorting number 8, which is 113,807. And I believe also the home numbers on project assorting number 9, which is $525,028. On the annual plan, I didn't see where they were included in the 5-year consolidated.
Well, this is supposed to represent the 5-year con plan. This grid was taken from that. Now, when you refer to the annual action plan, are you referring to the 2019-2020 annual action plan, the last one? Pull that up. Because each con plan has a corresponding annual action plan. So, are you looking at the last year of the previous comp plan, 2019, 2020?
No, I'm looking at the con plan section, which I think was the slide 7.
Okay. Okay. I'm sorry. This is Goldsboro annual action plan when I see this. Okay. So we have Goldsboro consolidated plan slides up, and we have Goldsboro annual action plans up. So is this the slide, Jocelyn, that he's referring to?
Well, this is what I'm talking about in this consolidated plan section.
Mm-hmm.
Those numbers you were looking at on the annual plan aren't included in the 5-year consolidated plan here.
Okay, good.
Because I don't see in this section anywhere in this at $62,000 they point out in the annual plan section, which was this project number 7, 8, and 9, I believe.
Okay, Mr. Martin. What we can do is circle back with you to make sure we fleshed out this particular concern concerning the numbers and some discrepancies there, but we definitely want to take note of that. Okay, Mr. Martin?
Okay. As far as that is concerned, and the other concern is looking at the numbers for, what is it? Public facilities and improvements, and which is WA Forster Center and public facility improvements for city owned. When you add up those numbers for the funding plan, significant amount of money, and it is, at least to my way of thinking, the most important aspect, the #1 priority, is getting housing for these people in the low to moderate income areas of Goldsboro. And if you are funding a majority of the funds, and I believe statistically it's about 2/3 of the amount that the city has available, considering the amount which they're going to receive over the next fiscal year. Like almost 1/3 of that is going into public facilities. And if you're putting that much in public facilities, how much do you have left to deal with your #1 priority?
Thank you for that, Mr. Martin. We'll definitely take note of that. Any other individuals would like to speak at this time, or India, do you want to call from the chat function?
Okay, I do see that, Mr.
I would like to make a comment. I have a couple of questions. I went up on Monday and provided comments about the plan to the city. My name is Alicia Pierce. One of my questions to your organization, because one of the questions that I posed, or one of the things that I addressed a couple of times, is that last year, with the CAPER and with the annual plan, there were comments and suggestions that were made for the annual plan that we're currently, in the midst of now doing, which would have been the 2019-2020, and for the CAPER. And for some reason, none of the suggestions are showing up in the con plan or the actual, the annual plan. And my question is your organization going to help hold them accountable for not following through?
Yes, hello, Ms. Pierce?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, hi, this is Jocelyn, and my colleagues can chime in if they feel they need to as well. That is the intent. We're definitely sending comments on behalf of the community group. We will be in direct contact with Ms. Shiko Simpson-Carter and the city manager once we've submitted these comments, and actually follow up to inquire if there's any update after the comments have been submitted, because they are a direct result of the community group and their concerns. That is the intent.
Okay, and then one of my other thoughts was, when I was providing input to them, as I guess all of you know, if you read the whole one, the survey that you all went through and reviewed, was that a survey you all did, or was that the survey that she did off of when you're going through the annual plan, you see the survey, you can click on it, and then, because I took it, and some of the questions that you all mentioned, I didn't see those questions, unless, because there were two surveys. There was a stakeholder one, and then there was a residential one.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
just to understand like what she was asking residents, which I mentioned in my comments, I thought it was odd that the number of survey respondents was so low, because she put in the plan she only had 56 people responded and only 141 retrieved. And I told her and the council, with 34,000 people, how is it the number is so low that that's the only amount of people that even knew about the survey? So did you guys do a different survey? Because hers says she only had 56 respondents.
Yes, ma'am. So, Ms. Pierce, this survey was initiated by the Office of Lands because we wanted to obtain feedback that would be represented within the written comments that we plan to submit on behalf of the client group. Our colleagues over at the Justice Center helped distribute that information with guidance from our community group, and we discussed with Matt as far as the questions that Lance wanted to initiate to prompt the discussion so that we could have the conversation that we're having today to make sure that the concerns and barriers that you all are seeing within the city of Goldsboro are reflected in the written comments that we want to submit on the client group's behalf. So those are two separate surveys that were submitted. One was submitted by the city, and of course we submitted surveys to the distribution list that's through Wayne Forward, because we're trying to start the conversation, pull information back from you guys to see what the concerns are from the citizens.
Okay, thank you.
This is Carl Martin again, and I had a couple of other comments that I wanted to make, and that is carryover, prior year resources. And this year, there's $180,123 that are left over from past years in CDBG funds. And to me, that's, raises some questions. Well, why wasn't that money spent? And the same is with the home program. They had carryover of $525,028. Why weren't these funds spent in the prior years? That's a lot of money. That's like almost 2 years worth of funding that they received. So is the city conscientious in their efforts to use the money that's available to help people out? Is a concern that I have. Or are they more concerned with saving up this money so that they get a large sum, which they then will use for some large building project?
That's a good point, Mr. Martin, and we can highlight that particular concern in our comments.
And another is the COVID
Yes,
funds.
sir.
The COVID funds, from what they are saying, is has some specific purposes. And
yes,
and when I'm looking at the plans for how they're going to spend it, I don't see anything about testing, where any of these entities, nonprofits and things that are using, or they're going to use to spend this money, is going to do some sort of testing program for LMI families in these specific areas. And I think testing is very important in controlling the spread of it. So I'm concerned with that bucket of money, that $200,000, and how are these nonprofits are going to use it, and are they going to be held accountable for the funds that they spent?
Great comment, Mr. Martin. We'll definitely make sure that that's highlighted.
As well as voting help also. For example, the cost of absentee ballot applications. They're going to require a stamp. And some of the LMIs may look at that, well, this is 55 cents that I could be spending on something else that I'm more in need of than voting. So I think voting help could also be an element to look into when you're spending these funds.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Are there any other comments through the chat function, India?
No, they're not.
Does anyone else have any questions to piggyback on anything that Mr. Martin stated or that was highlighted as we went through this presentation regarding how Goldsboro plans to affirmatively further fair housing?
Hey, Yolanda, this is Jocelyn. And just to follow up, there is still more to the presentation, just FYI,
Okay.
but we definitely want individuals to please voice your concerns. Ms. Pierce and Mr. Martin, we got your information. We really appreciate the feedback. Is there anything else, any other concerns? Based off of your review of the plan, off of the presentation and the data that was presented?
I just want to make a comment. This is Patricia. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to just make a response. Certainly doesn't negate Mr. Mark's question, but as an entity that is listed for the COVID-15 public service grants, I do want to say that we have received city funding before, and there is accountability. There are accountability measures for the funding that we receive. It doesn't, of course, they have the opportunity to give you that information, but there are definitely accountability measures placed before us as nonprofits when we receive those city funding. We receive city and federal COVID-19 funding for different things, and there are accountability measures. We are held accountable. So I just want to say that.
Thank you, Patricia. Any other comments from individuals? Any concerns about COVID funds, how they're allocated, issues with affordable housing?
Looks like
Yeah, let me jump. This is Matt. One thing, again, not speaking for the city, but to his point about has the city been holding this money, setting aside this money? Some of they have spent some of their CHOTO funds in the last couple of years, including this. I guess this year, to be honest, I'm a little confused as to what exactly cycle or the funding falls in, but Habitat is a recipient of CHOTO funds and has been in the past. But it is my understanding that part of their goal is to use some of this funding, and I believe it's on the plan, 300 or 500,000. I don't remember exactly what it was on the 10-year plan. But discussing the use of that for the large-scale multifamily housing project, and trying to, I think the rental housing development, and trying to get that, using some of this funding to help spur one of those projects on the way, to help as many families as possible. So that is, again, that's from conversation that I've had with the city. That's been a focus of theirs. So just to speak to what Mr. Martin was saying, and certainly I think it's a legitimate discussion. Is that the best use of the funding? Could there have been a little more transparency over the plans and what they're hoping to do with that funding and why that money is not being spent? All those things I think definitely could have been addressed or handled perhaps a little bit differently.
This is Alicia Pierce again. As I mentioned in the meeting, the public comment meeting of the annual plan for 2019-2020 last June, Ms. Nicole Simpson actually said in her presentation to those of us that were there, was not many of us there, that some of that home funding was being rolled over for the last couple of years because she could not find qualified candidates that would qualify credit-wise, and also were low to moderate income individuals for that home funding. And that's why she had been rolling it over for the last 2 or 3 years. So I'm not sure about anybody else, but that's what I heard her say personally. So that's why that has continued to be a red flag as to not just the transparency of it, because she was then providing the transparency of it, that it's just being rolled over because she couldn't. And so again, I have suggested to her ways to ensure that more citizens are aware that the funding is even in existence, because I want to believe that because the only reason I know about it is because I go out to look for it and read it. But the average citizen is not being given the knowledge base they need to utilize this program. And so that's why, once again, I'm asking your organization, are you going to start attempting to hold them accountable for what they are putting out and then failing to do?
Are you speaking to legal aid, or are you speaking to Wayne Ford? I mean, as it relates to legal aid, we support the community in holding the city accountable. So it will be you guys, you everyone here today on the Zoom, and other people in the community who may be impacted will be the ones actually holding the city accountable. We are writing these comments on your behalf. We're prohibited, based on our regulations at Legal Aid, from independently lobbying local government entities like a city council or, So definitely everything that we write, as Jocelyn mentioned earlier, will be done on your behalf. So if that is something that you're saying is concerning and something that needs to be red flagged in our comments, then that's something that we will take into consideration. Now, do you know what efforts were taken by the city to actually find people who may qualify?
Well, per her plan and per what she explained, she always advertises in the newspaper, and she always put it on the website. And so, as I explained to her, everybody don't subscribe to the newspaper, and then also everybody doesn't go to their website, and there should be other ways of putting that information out. I mean, and I don't really need, I'm grateful y'all are here, but I plan to have my comments. So like I said, I went and read my comments, and then I also plan to submit my comments as well. But I feel like I'm as much as an advocate for the need of the community as you are, but I don't have a legal background. So that's all I keep. That's why I keep asking about the
part. That's what we bring to bear in this partnership. We bring to bear legal remedies to these issues, and part one was about fair housing. That's the legal lever that we will use as it relates to how they're spending the money, and are they actually affirmatively furthering fair housing, because that's what they certify to HUD in receipt of these funds. So that's what we bring to bear. We bring to bear community-informed written comments mixed with our legal knowledge and legal research skills, and also this legal lever of their duty to affirmatively further fair housing.
Okay, well, like I said, I'm just telling you from what she told me, and I just feel like that's a poor excuse to say, well, I just couldn't find enough low to moderate income individuals that also could qualify credit-wise. Because I don't think that, back to using her survey results that's written in this plan, if there's 35,000 residents, which we realize all of them don't need assistance with the program, but I find it hard that 141 were retrieved, but only 56 respondents. My question to her, and I'm expecting comments back from the city and from the community block grant director, how did you get this survey out to the people? Because the only reason I saw the survey is because I went to read the grant. So if I hadn't read the grant, I wouldn't even know the survey exists. And so if that makes sense is what I'm saying. I just don't think that there is enough due diligence being done to actually get this information out to those that really need it and could possibly qualify.
And I'm sorry, Alicia, I'm going to jump in real quick, because I believe the folks with Legal Aid said there was a little bit more to the presentation they wanted to get to. I don't want to speak on their behalf, but I do think that certainly a part of the response can include some discussion about the way response and input is received on the plan on the front end. So that can continue to be improved as we move forward. And of course, I'm all for continuing to improve and engage the community more in that on the front end. Briefly, again, not to speak for the city. I think part of what she was talking about was the down payment assistance funds, and which are provided out of the home funds, and those are available and are based on credit and falling that low to moderate income, but they have to be buying a home to get that. And yes, again, I agreed that more can be done. I think be perfectly fine to put in these comments that more can be done to make sure that that home buyers are aware that banks and whatnot are also aware that those funds are available from the city to help those home buyers. But those are funds that must be applied for to be accessed. But I'm going to let Jocelyn or Yolanda or Alicia or whomever wanted to take the next portion of the presentation and take it from there, so we don't go too far over time.
Okay, thank you, Matt, and thank you, Ms. Pierce and Mr. Martin and others that shared their concerns. We're going to go ahead and move forward with the next part. So we wanted to mention that when we met last week, there were certain concerns that were discussed, and these are ones that we intend to bring up in our written comments that we're going to submit to the city. So some of them include: the city has not defined affordability for targeted rental and home ownership options. The city lacks a citywide vision or policy for housing that creates new affordable housing and rehab city-owned vacant housing. City has limited staff capacity to focus on a comprehensive citywide housing development plan that will affirmatively further fair housing in areas of opportunity. In areas of opportunity, we mean where there are vital resources like employment and grocery stores and quality schools and other important resources like that. Another concern was the lack of public-private partnership to create a comprehensive affordable housing plan. A concern about insufficient housing units that meet the minimum housing code. The city needs a better method of counting homeless people. The city needs a full-time person to coordinate funding sources for those experiencing homelessness. There's a perceived lack of housing choice for Section 8 voucher holders who are transitioning from homelessness through local agencies. The new analysis of impediments has not been provided to the public to review in conjunction with the consolidated plan and annual action plan. The consolidated plan mentions that there's going to be an updated analysis of impediments, but we have not seen that yet. So that would be also an important document to review. The city should allocate more money toward the urgent housing repair program. The city lacks a marketing and housing plan for attracting homeownership in its central district. The city has used CDBG funds to demolish naturally occurring affordable housing and other commercial places like Center Street Hotel, but has not used CDBG funds to create new affordable housing in those places. The city has not addressed ways to overcome the not in my backyard sentiment, which was stated as a barrier to affordable housing and fair choice. As you may recall in the plan, there were people who did not want certain housing developments because of perceived increase in traffic congestion. So that's what we're referring to in this whole not in my backyard. Okay, so based upon the city's goals and strategies to create affordable housing, and we wanted to kind of break down the city's goals and provide some possible specific strategies that could be used to achieve them. As you may recall earlier in the presentation, when we broke down those barriers to affordable housing and then the city's ideas for goals to overcome the barriers, it was pretty vague. The city didn't actually specify what strategies they were going to use. So we wanted to propose some ideas for you all to consider that could be included in our written comments for the city to research and potentially incorporate. So one is to designate redevelopment zones, which could accommodate an increase in density and serve as a location for mixed use and mixed income developments. So what we mean by this would be the city actually looking at the neighborhoods and communities and trying to identify specific areas that would be redevelopment zones where they would want to do this mixed use, mixed income development. And that would be important so that you could allow increased, density, because we want more affordable housing. So we're going to have to figure out what areas we would want to promote affordable housing, which would mean increasing the number of units. And so some kind of plan that includes designating certain redevelopment zones could be an option. Another strategy would be called inclusionary upzoning. So this connects greater housing development to incentives for affordable housing. So for example, the city could allow a zoning change which permits a developer to have a taller building or greater density in exchange for the developer setting aside a portion of affordable housing units. So there's basically this exchange between the developer and the city. So the city would allow the developer to maybe have more units than what is ordinarily zoned for, or taller building height than what's ordinarily zoned for, if the developer agrees to set aside affordable housing. So that's another strategy the city could look at. A third one would be affordable housing overlay zones. So these could be specific zones or areas that have built-in incentives for affordable housing. So the city could offer a developer and say, hey, listen, we've identified area A as a zone and we want affordable housing in this area. And we are willing to offer you incentives such as a streamlined permitting process. So like an expedited permitting process, or we'll waive permitting fees, or we'll allow you to have more housing than what's ordinarily allowed, or we'll lower parking restrictions if you offer affordable housing. So it's like the city trying to negotiate with developers and providing incentives to encourage them to provide affordable housing in certain areas. The fourth option could be accessory dwelling units. Some of you may be familiar with this already, but basically this would be like a second unit that would be located next to a single family detached home. So some people call it like mother-in-law suites or carriage homes, but they're basically a little smaller, and you could convert like a garage into one of these accessory dwelling units or just build a smaller home. When land is limited and you're trying to find ways to increase affordable housing, this is a possible option. So if there are existing single family homes with enough land space to put a smaller home next to it, that could be an option. Not necessarily all single family homes, and the city could figure out what areas maybe they would want this, or if they would open it up to any homeowner that has a single family home and meets the criteria to have it. But the goal is trying to find a way to increase affordable housing, and this is an option. And this could potentially work for like seniors, because it'd be smaller space, but still be able to provide basic housing needs. So that's something to consider. All right, so the second strategy that, or the second goal that the city has is to preserve affordability and housing quality. So one specific strategy we wanted to highlight is conservation zones. So these would actually be the opposite of redevelopment zones. We want to, or we could potentially tell the city, look at certain areas where we may want to conserve or limit development. There may be certain neighborhoods where there's already a certain look and feel that the community residents like, maybe lower density, and they don't want increased density. They don't want a high rise in that particular neighborhood. So the city could look at certain areas where development would be limited, and that would try to maintain the affordability of the current neighborhood and preserve the character and density of the neighborhood too. You know, there's always a challenge with trying to think about development, and you want to balance areas for redevelopment, but then other areas where maybe development is limited. And so that's why it's really important to have this comprehensive approach to this affordable housing development. And so when the city looks at redevelopment zones, they also need to look at conservation zones. What areas should we limit development and protect the character and nature of the existing neighborhood? The next strategy is equitable code enforcement. I know many people have brought up the concern about poor housing conditions that don't meet minimum housing code. And the city has code enforcement. However, we believe it's important for equitable code enforcement. We don't want this whole targeted approach where the city is just going and looking at all homes that are below the minimum code and condemning them all. We want the city to have more of a comprehensive approach to how they do code enforcement. Yes, we need to address minimum housing code. Yes, we need to address poor housing conditions, but it needs to be balanced, because you also have to think about the individuals who own those homes. Some may be seniors with a fixed income and have deteriorating homes and may need assistance with repairing the home. And so if it's possible for them to take advantage of the urgent home repair, that's great. If not, perhaps the city can think through how else can we work with homeowners to bring their homes up to minimum code. So we just don't want the city to just, demolish or target all homes that are below minimum code. There needs to be a better approach so that this is done in an equitable or fair way. All right, promote equitable and accessible housing options. One strategy would be to strengthen the connection between affordable housing, transit, and workforce. So this is really key too, because we want to make sure we remind the city and push them on their duty to affirmatively further fair housing. And that means that they need to promote fair housing choice so that housing is not concentrated in one particular area, and affordable housing is not concentrated in a particular area. It needs to be spread out, especially in areas of opportunity. And areas of opportunity have things like transit options and jobs and quality schools. And so there needs to be more of an emphasis on connecting housing with these other resources. And that takes planning, it does. But I think we need to be pushing the city to be thinking deeper about this. So we don't just want affordable housing anywhere. We need to be thinking about strategic places where they could be built that connects them to important resources that people need. The next option is land banking function for affordable housing. What we mean by this is the city being able to legally acquire vacant sites from absentee landlords and partner with private or nonprofit developers to build affordable housing. So this could be a possible option. if the city tries to work with homeowners and or landlords, and landlords just like are not complying or just absentee and are not involved in the effort, we don't want the minimum or the poor conditioned housing to just be there long term. So perhaps the city could then figure out, okay, maybe there are certain properties that we could acquire and work with a nonprofit or a developer to be able to build affordable housing. Again, it's more so just thinking about other ways that we can promote affordable housing. And I think that working with private developers or nonprofits to try and create this affordable housing is going to be key. All right, stabilize residents at risk of involuntary displacement. So there will be some residents that'll be displaced through some of the development. We don't know exactly how many, and the goal should be to minimize displacement. But I guess we all need to be realistic that some residents will be displaced. And so it's important then for the city to plan for this. Number one, you want to try to minimize the number of people who will be displaced. So even if they're going to be redeveloping an area, like some of the opportunity zones, for instance, we want the people who are currently living there or near there to be able to remain, or even if they're temporarily displaced so that development can happen, that they are able to come back. And for those that absolutely are not able to come back, then there needs to be some kind of program or plan to move them to affordable and safe housing that's nearby. Again, trying to find a way to provide housing that's close to important resources as much as possible. And so we think the city needs to think through this more. And one option is to create some type of housing assistance displacement program. And that would be especially for renters, and thinking through how many people would be at risk of being displaced. Is there a way to minimize that? And for those that have to be, how can we stabilize them in a neighborhood that has safe and affordable housing and close to resources? So that's the idea behind this program. Okay, so our next steps will be to take your feedback from the poll questions as well as what we discussed today and submit written comments to the city that talks about your concerns and proposes certain recommendations for strategies about affordable housing. So the city's deadline to submit the comments is June 25th. So we will be working on that and submitting it by the deadline. Does anybody else have any questions or concerns before we end?
I was getting ready to type it in, but I'll just speak if that's okay.
Yes, it is. Okay.
My question is this, and it kind of goes along with what Ms. Pierce has said as well. Should we, you are submitting this information, you're submitting the public comment. What is the next step after that? Should the city decide, as they normally have, to ignore public comment?
So our next step would be to remain in communication with Ms. Simpson. Of course, we are going to recommend that they consider our comments and include some of these strategies and concerns and address them in the plan. But this is not like a submit comments and then walk away. We want to continue to engage with you all as a community, and we're going to have to, as a collective body, continue to push the city. So if you all are interested, down the road, I think that it will be important to have meetings with the city to talk about how these plans are actually going to be implemented, because there's a lot of moving parts, and I think the city is going to have to take more time to come up with more step-by-step processes for how they're going to implement the consolidated plan and the annual action plan. And I think that we all need to be at the table to talk about that.
Agreed, Alicia. And just to emphasize what was stated earlier, you know, we're a subsidiary part. We support the community group. So that drive is definitely going to need to come from the citizens and the individuals within the community, specifically within this particular Wayne Ford housing and poverty and housing portion, being that is our represented entity. So we'll definitely be there as support and to assist where we can from a legal perspective.
And just to piggyback on what my staff has stated, the model that we've used in other cities, mainly Rocky Mount, is, you know, we're here making the written comments based on the concerns that are lifted in this group. Our initial meeting with Wayne Uplift, and some of you may not have been in that meeting, was to train residents on how to build a consensus in the community where residents are able to have a shared goal and a shared vision for what they want in their community. And so it's going to take two parts to this. It's going to take citizens and residents going to these public hearings, raising your concerns. Then it's going to take legal aid, supporting you in that, submitting these written comments. And then our goal, which is what we've done in Rocky Mount, is to knock down whatever barriers exist and actually get the community, as was stated by Alicia, at the table with the city, and using that legal lever of fair housing. And of course, you know, if the city still dismisses that, then, you know, legal aid with consultation with Wayne Ford can discuss if we should file a complaint with HUD. I mean, because their monitoring and their use of these funds, you know, are supposed to be monitored by HUD. And if there are concerns, I mean, HUD will investigate. I mean, I've seen HUD investigate other cities and how they use funds and how they manage funds. But I know we're at the end of the presentation, but one thing I wanted to lift up was just going back to the home funds. I guess my experience of how other cities have used those funds, they've also used it. They've also given this money to like nonprofit developers to build rental housing. And I think someone mentioned in our last call that the city was not leading in that effort. It was not leading in the effort to rehab homes, owner-occupied homes, and we're not leading in the effort to build affordable housing. So I don't know if the lack of use, is there a lack of using those funds to give to developers, Matt? I know you are like a developer at Habitat for Humanity. Have you ever used those funds to build affordable?
Yeah, we've used CHOTO funds in the past. We are actually about to take a draw on a pot of CHOTO funds that was designated for us this year, here in the next couple weeks. So they have been used. I know I am pretty sure the Housing Authority has accessed those CHOTO funds in the past as well, or at least has been approved to access them. Whether they ended up doing that or not, I think might have been based on whether or not their project actually came to fruition. But the CHOTO funds have been used in the recent past. But it is definitely something that that I think we could talk to the city about who's eligible, and a little more, like I said before, a little more transparency as to what the goals are for those, because there is some of that money I think was being looked at to be used for a multi-family. Of course, we do single family, and I think part of the thought process was how can we get the most bang for the buck and help a large number of families rather than single family developers, which is why we haven't tapped into it more. While I'm on here, I wanted to mention a couple of thoughts, a couple of questions. Looking at the recap of the community comments on that slide, there was the line that mentioned the using the CDBG funds to demolish naturally occurring affordable housing. I think we discussed last meeting, Mr. Barnes and I had kind of talked about it a little bit. Those funds were used to demolish those was like the Center Street Hotel and the one on Grantham Street, I believe. But I'm not sure that would use the phrase naturally occurring affordable housing for those for those projects. So those were, yeah, that just wasn't naturally occurring affordable housing. Those were two hotel and blighted areas that needed to come down. I think it might be fair. I think perhaps it could be fair to question how those funds have been used to create new affordable housing. But I don't think it's demolished. I don't think it was used to demolish any naturally occurring affordable housing. The other question I had, looking at the proposed strategies for affordable housing, there's a lot of good ideas in here, and definitely things that I think are worth further exploration and discussion and deeper understanding as to what some of these things mean. Like, for example, the phrase inclusionary upzoning. I've not heard it a phrase like that. I've heard the phrase inclusionary zoning, which is I'm sure we all know, a big red flag to a lot of developers, and a lot of their communities are shying away from doing that. And I know there's some questions about the legality of inclusionary zoning. So I'm not sure if maybe this inclusionary upzoning is a different approach to that. But my question was, not to get into all those details right now, but are all these proposed strategies part of the letter, or are these strategies for affordable housing that we're putting on the table for these future meetings and for future discussion, perhaps with the city, as we continue to meet and continue to work this as a grassroots community effort?
Thanks, Matt, for your comments. We'll edit the comment about the naturally occurring affordable housing that you mentioned from last week's meeting. Also, regarding these strategies, we are putting them on the table for you all to consider. We can include some of these or all of these in the recommendations if that's what you all want. Our goal was to kind of give you some ideas of strategies that could be used, because the city didn't come up with any. And it would be important for actual strategies to be explored, not just saying we're going to try to increase affordable housing, but actually proposing certain ideas of how that can be done. Regarding the inclusionary upzoning, you're right, inclusionary zoning generally is a controversial topic, and there have been disagreement about the legal aspects of the mandatory one. But for the inclusionary upzoning, this would be more so incentives. So the city actually agreeing to change the zoning for a certain area if the developer agrees to provide affordable housing units. So the key would be here voluntary, so that it would be up to the developer and not actually mandating to do it.
So, and thanks for that explanation of the difference. So I guess the question on the table is how much of these strategies to include. So would it, since we haven't had the opportunity and to sit down and compare the current, and maybe y'all have, and if so, please correct me. But since we haven't really, as a group, had opportunity to sit down and say, okay, we want to take a deeper dive into what does it mean, what does inclusionary upzoning mean, or what does affordable housing overlay zones mean, and look at what the current zoning ordinances in the city are, or anything like that. Would it be fair to just as part of these comments, suggest that perhaps, like you said, rather than just saying our goal is to have a more affordable housing, note in the comments that there is not or does not appear to be any strategies for that laid out, and then put these, we can list these as potential strategies that we would like to discuss with the city, that we would like to explore with the city further. Would that be an appropriate way of kind of putting these on the table without necessarily saying we we want to focus on one or two of these specifically.
Yes, that is exactly right. We can just propose them that the city can explore and that we would like to have further discussions on with the city. That's a good idea. No, nobody has to commit to them in terms of these are the exact ones that we want and that's it. These are just ideas. And so, yes, we can definitely include that as proposed strategies for the city to explore and for us to have follow-up discussions on.
Yes, and just to back off
Oh, go
of
ahead, Matt.
Alicia, we just really want to start the conversation. As Alicia mentioned, there wasn't anything identified, so we're just putting the information out there so the conversation can be started with community input as far as what they'd like to see. But having an open-ended saying, suggested strategies, I think that's fair.
And Matt, the way we've seen it done, as far as building the community's consensus around strategies, as stated, we're just offering these up as suggestions since there are none. But then when we meet later as a group, the community group can then vet what strategies they can prioritize, which ones should be addressed, because we know that, a city will not be able to necessarily adopt or address all strategies at once. So there would be these follow-up meetings where you're actually vetting and then prioritizing which strategies you prefer and which ones you think actually will work for your community.
Okay, great. Thank you. That makes, I think that sounds like a good path forward. All right, anybody else have comments, concerns, questions about the plan? Want to make sure that anything is or perhaps is not included in a written response to the city based on these?
If no one has any questions, Matt, I wanted to, if I could share my screen, I wanted to ask you guys about this racially ethnic concentrated area of poverty that's on the map for Goldsboro, just so it can inform our knowledge about, the communities, because that is considered to be a fair housing issue if there's a racially ethnic concentrated area of poverty. So do you mind if I just show that screen real quick? And you can, and someone here can identify that neighborhood? Okay, see if I can find it here. Share the screen. Can you guys see it? Well, hold on, let me click on it. There it is. Do you see the purple? So this is Goldsboro, and then this purple area is considered to be a concentrated area of poverty. Like, where is that? Because we're not familiar with the map of Goldsboro.
Can you zoom in on it a little bit?
Yes, let me see. Did it get larger? It doesn't have street names or anything like that, so, and not being.
Oh, that's kind of hard.
Okay, so not just hard for us. Well,
Is that based on
that's not at all where I was expecting that box to be.
Is that a census tract or?
Well, it's considered as a ledger. Can you see my ledger too? You might have to move your Zoom chat box. See, there's a ledger that talks about race, green being African American, orange being white, but then there's this recap ethnic concentrated area of poverty. And I think this is data from 2017, but it may have been based on, the last census data as well. So it could be old, but I guess I was just always wondering, like, where is this? It seems to be within the boundaries of Goldsboro. So.
That's like Salem Church Road. Am I looking at it right?
That wouldn't be it, though.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's no. I think it's more. Is that more West Grantham Street? Like in going out 70 West. Like.
So that's you can. I think that's George Street going straight north right there, and then to the right of that, if I'm John, you correct me here because you know Goldsboro at least as well as anybody else. In the middle of that, is that the old GE plant?
GE plant. Right. If that's GE, that's Folso Workman Street, North. It'll be South James
That might
Street.
be that.
It looks like
Because there's not a lot of houses.
Yeah, I'm looking for landmarks. And the only thing I can kind of
Yeah,
figure
that's
out is
what, and I can't really.
so it looks like that
Where do you
bottom,
get the map from, Yolanda?
HUD.
yeah, the bottom purple
Yeah,
line,
HUD. Right.
that looks like Ash Street. I think, because then where it kind of sticks out, that's Stevens Mill Road. I wish I could point at it on with my cursor. But yeah, right there, that the bottom yellow line, the bottom purple line, looks like Ash Street, and then over here where it sticks out to the bottom left is like Stevens Mill Road over here, I think. Oh yeah, down.
Matt,
But that's
I'm
not
pretty
high
sure,
poverty though.
Matt,
No,
I'm
that's what I'm
pretty
saying.
sure
Like,
it's
but that's what the
That would be
some of
high
the-
poverty area.
Matt,
it
I'm
would
pretty
include
sure
West
it's
Haven.
Ash Street, like the southernmost purple line, like you said, is Ash Street. You go north, and I think that's picking up 117, 1370.
Yeah.
I think your easternmost line is probably Herman Street. This is my neighborhood. This is where I live. And then your westernmost dot is going to be
Like Claridge Nursery
Homes,
Road.
maybe.
I think it goes all the way out to Claridge Nursery, I think.
Yeah. There's.
It's an odd, because like other than maybe like West Haven and North End, there's not. It starts going out to where there's not much there. I would have thought that a bigger cluster would have been coming down John and Slocum and that whole corridor,
Right there
rather
and
than
there.
going off to the west.
Yeah, well, I don't know if the Justice Center could possibly help us with overlaying mapping, like with street names and things like that, so we could pinpoint it. And like I said, it could be old. I was just wondering and thought that this was a great opportunity just to show that, because we're trying to figure out where this community is.
Well, that would
And
include like Clingman
this is
Street.
Alicia Pierce. This is Alicia Pierce. Could it possibly be down like in the Little Washington area, the area that flooded? Because that flood area made a lot of that area where it's got a housing unit down there, as well as a lot of those people do live almost like it's kind of poverty stricken. I don't really know where the area is, but could that be what it is?
I don't think it reaches down into Little Washington, and certainly doesn't include Lincoln or anything back on the Harris Street. But definitely, like you said, I saw you said in the comments, the North End and West Haven are certainly low income and are concentrated areas. But of all the areas in the community to circle out, that one. It's kind of surprised
This way,
they would go
put it
so
this
far
way.
west.
That chunk of Goldsboro ain't any poorer than the rest of Goldsboro.
Okay. Well, thank you guys. I'll see if we can flesh it out a little bit more too on our end. Okay. Charleston, Alicia, I don't know if you guys have anything else to say.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. I was talking and didn't take myself off mute. Okay, so that concludes the presentation. If we don't have any other comments or questions or concerns, Matt, we will be in touch with you in regards to the draft and the next steps and things of that nature. We have taken notes. Thank you all for all the comments in the chat. And the individuals that have provided their email for further reach out. We really do appreciate it. With that, I think that's it.
Thank you. One quick note, back to your map. I think that is, if not exactly, that's pretty close to Census Tract 18 in the city. So I was just looking that up. But just information. But yeah, thank you so much for the work that y'all have done for helping put this presentation together, or for putting the presentation together, so that we can have this conversation. And yeah, just look forward to the written comments and next steps. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye.
Thank you.